Welcome back to another reading live stream. Tonight, I will be reading 3 chapters of The Hobbit because, so basically chapters 10, 11, and 12 of The Hobbit, because 2 of the 3 chapters are pretty short, whereas the 4th chapter is pretty much double both of them. So we're going to go ahead and just get started reading it, and we'll see how long it takes for me to get here. It is currently 12:54 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so we shall see how this goes from here on in. So without further ado, don't mind any background noises that you guys hear. Whatever happens, happens. I cannot control that, but hopefully it doesn't distract you guys from this reading live stream. Also, I want to say if you guys come in and you say hello or whatever you wish to say, and I'm reading it, don't say that I'm ignoring you, because I will try to find uh, spots to where I could look at chat to see what, if anything, I have missed. So without further ado, let's get started with chapter 10 of The Hobbit. Also, hold on, actually, before I do that, let me fix that. There we go. All right. Um. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 10. A Warm Welcome. The day grew lighter and warmer as they floated along. After a while, the river rounded a steep shoulder of land that came down upon their left. Under its rocky feet, like an inland cliff, the deepest stream had flowed lapping and bubbling. Suddenly, the cliff fell away. The shores sank. The trees ended. Then Bilbo saw a sight. The lands opened wide about him, filled with the waters of the river, which broke up and wandered in 100 winding courses, or halted in the marshes and pools dotted with isles on every side. But still a strong water flowed on steadily through the midst. And far away, its arc head in a torn cloud, there loomed the mountain, its nearest neighbors to the northeast, and the tumbled land that joined it to them could not be seen. All alone it rose and looked across the marshes to the forest. The lonely mountain! Bilbo had come far and through many adventures to see it, and now he did not like the look of it in the least. As he listened to the talk of to the raftmen and pieced together the scraps of information they let fall, he soon realized that he was very fortunate ever to have seen it at all, even from this distance. Dreary as had been his imprisonment and unpleasant as was his position, to say nothing of the poor dwarfs underneath him, still he had been more lucky than he had guessed. The talk was all of the trade that came and went on the waterways and the growth of the traffic on the river, as the roads out of the east towards Mirkwood vanished or fell into disuse, and of the bickerings of the lake men and the wood elves about the upkeep of the forest. Okay, moving on. The upkeep of the forest river and the care of the banks. Those lands had changed much since the days when dwarfs dwelt in the mountain, days which most people now remembered only as a very shadowy tradition. They had changed even in recent years, and since the last news that Gandalf had of them. Great floods and rains had swollen the waters that flowed east, and there had been an earthquake or two, which some were inclined to attribute to the dragon, alluding to him chiefly with a curse and an ominous nod in the direction of the mountain. The marshes and bogs had spread wider and wider on either side. Paths had vanished, and many a rider and wanderer too, if they had tried to find the lost ways across. The elf road through the wood which the dwarfs had followed on the advice of Beorn now came to a doubtful and little used end at the eastern edge of the forest. Only the river offered any longer a safe way from the skirts of Mirkwood in the north to the mountain-shadowed plains beyond, and the river was guarded by the Wood Elves' king. So you see, Bilbo had come in at the end by the only road that was any good. It might have been some comfort to Mr. Baggins shivering on the barrels, if he had known that news of this had reached Gandalf far away, and given him great anxiety, and that he was in fact finishing his other business, which does not come into this tale, and getting ready to come in search of Thorin's company. But Bilbo did not know it. All he knew was that the river seemed to go on and on and on forever, and he was hungry, and had a nasty cold in the nose, and did not like the way the mountains seemed to frown at him and threaten him as it drew ever nearer. After a while, however, the river took a more southerly course, and the mountain receded again, and at last, late in the day, the shores grew rocky, the river gathered all its wandering waters together into a deep and rapid flood, and they swept along at great speed. The sun had set when, turning with another sweep towards the east, the forest river rushed into the long lake. There it had a wide mouth with a stony cliff-like gates at either side whose feet were piled with shingles. The long lake. Bilbo had never imagined that any water that was not the sea could look so big. It was so wide that the opposite shores looked small and far, but it was so long its northerly end, which pointed towards the mountain, could not be seen at all. Only from the map did Bilbo know that away up there, where the stars of the lane were already twinkling, the running river came down into the lake from Dale, and with the forest river filled with deep waters, what must once have been a great deep rocky valley. At the southern end, the doubled waters poured out again over high waterfalls and ran away hurriedly to unknown lands. In the still evening air, the noise of the falls could be heard like a distant roar. Not far from the mouth of the forest river was the strange town he heard the elves speak of in the king's cellars. It was not built on the shore, though there were a few huts and buildings there, but right out on the surface of the lake, protected from the swirl of the entering river by a prominent, sorry, promontory of rock which formed a calm bay. A great bridge made of wood ran out to where on huge piles made of forest trees was built a busy wooden town, not a town of elves but of men, who still dared to dwell here under the shadow of the distant Dragon Mountain. They still throve on the trade that came up the great river from the south, and was carted past the falls to their town. But in the great days of old, when Dale in the north was rich and prosperous, they had been wealthy and powerful, and there had been fleets of boats on the waters. And some were filled with gold, and some with warriors in armor, and there had been wars and deeds which were now only a legend. The rotting piles of a greater town could still be seen along the shores when the waters sank in a drought. But men remembered little of all that, though some still sang old songs of the dwarf kings of the mountain, Thror and Thrain of the race of Durin, and of the coming of the dragon, and the fall of the lords of Dale. Some sang too that Thror and Thrain would come back one day, and gold would flow in the rivers through the mountain gates, and all that land would be filled with new song and new laughter. But this pleasant legend did not much affect their daily business. Before we continue, as I always do when it comes to illustrations, I'm going to show you guys this one here. In case you're wondering what that says on the very bottom, it says Lake Town. Yeah, there you go. There's that. Moving on. As soon as the raft of barrels came in sight, boats rowed from the piles of the town, and voices hailed the raft steerers. Then ropes were cast and oars were pulled, and soon the raft was drawn out of the current of the forest river and towed away round the high shoulder of rock into the little bay of Lake Town. There it was moored not far from the shoreward head of the great bridge. Soon men would come up from the south and take some of the casks away, and others that would filled with goods they had brought to be taken back up the stream to the wood elves' home. In the meanwhile, the barrels were left afloat, while the elves of the raft and the boatmen were to feast in Lake Town. They would have been surprised if they could have seen what happened down by the shore, after they had gone and the shades of night had fallen. First of all, a barrel was cut loose by Bilbo and pushed to the shore and opened. Groans came from inside, and out crept a most unhappy dwarf. Wet straw was in his draggled beard. He was so sore and stiff, so bruised and buffeted, he could hardly stand or stumble through the shallow water to lie groaning on the shore. He had a famished and savage look like a dog that had been chained and forgotten in a kennel for a week. It was Thorin, but you could only have told it by his golden chain, and by the color of his now dirty and tattered sky blue hood, with its tarnished silver tassel. It was some time before he would be even polite to the Hobbit. "Well, are you alive or are you dead?" asked Bilbo quite crossly. Perhaps he had forgotten that he had at least one good meal more than the dwarfs, and also the use of his arms and legs, not to speak of a greater allowance of air. "Are you still in prison, or are you free? If you want food, and if you want to go on with this silly adventure, it's yours after all and not mine. You had better slap your arms and rub your legs, and try and help me get the others out of while there is a chance." Thorin, of course, saw the sense of this, so after a few more groans he got up and helped the hobbit as well as he could. In the darkness, floundering in the cold water, they had a difficult and very nasty job. My TV just became on. I was wondering, like, what the fuck was that? And then I looked at my TV and I seen that my thing wasn't muted anymore. It just made me jump a little bit. Alright, moving on. Anyway. In the darkness, floundering in the cold water, they had a difficult and very nasty job, finding which were the right barrels. Knocking outside and calling only discovered about 6 dwarves that could answer. These were unpacked and helped ashore, where they sat or lay muttering and moaning. They were so soaked and bruised and cramped that they could hardly yet realize their release or be properly thankful for it. Dwalin and Balin were two of the most unhappy, and it was no good asking them to help. Bifer and Bofer were less knocked about and drier, but they lay down and would do nothing. Filey and Kylie, however, who were young for dwarves, and had also been packed more neatly with plenty of straw into smaller casks, came out more or less smiling, with only a bruise or two and a stiffness that soon wore off. "I hope I never smell the smell of apples again," said Filey. "My toe is full of it. To smell apples everlastingly when you can scarcely move and are cold and sick with hunger is maddening. I could eat anything in the wide world now for hours on end, but not an apple." With a willing help of Filey and Kylie, Thorin and Bilbo at last discovered the remainder of the company and got them out. Poor fat Balber was asleep or senseless. Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Gloin were waterlogged and seemed only half alive. They all had to be carried one by one and laid helpless on the shore. "Well, here we are," said Thorin, "and I suppose we ought to thank our stars and Mr. Baggins. I'm sure he has a right to expect it, though I wish you could have arranged a more comfortable journey. Still, all very much at your service once more, Mr. Baggins. No doubt we shall feel properly grateful when we are fed and recovered. In the meanwhile, what's next? I suggest Lake Town, said Bilbo. What else is there? Nothing else could, of course, be suggested, so leaving the others, Thorin and Fily and Kylie and the Hobbit went along the shore to the great bridge. There were guards at the head of it, but they were not keeping very careful watch, for it was so long since there had been any real need. Except for occasional squabbles about river tolls, they were friends with the wood elves. Other folk were far away, and some of the younger people in the town openly doubted the existence of any dragon in the mountain, and laughed at the graybeards and gammers who said that they had seen him flying in the sky in their younger days. That being so, it is not surprising that the guards were drinking and laughing by a fire in their hut, and did not hear the noise of the unpacking of the dwarfs or the footsteps of the four scouts. Their astonishment was enormous when Thorin Oakenshield stepped in through the door. "Who are you and what do you want?" they shouted, leaping to their feet and groping for weapons. "Thorin, son of Thran, son of Thror, king under the mountain," said the dwarf in a loud voice, and he looked it, in spite of his torn clothes and draggled hood. The gold, the gold gleamed on his neck and waist. His eyes were dark and deep. "I have come back, and wish to see the master of your town." Then there was tremendous excitement. Some of the more foolish ran out of the hut as if they expected the mountain to go golden in the night and all the waters of the lake turn yellow right away. The captain of the guard came forward. "And who are these?" he asked, pointing to Fily and Kylie and Bilbo. "The sons of my father's daughter," answered Thorin. "Fily and Kylie of the race of Durin, and Mr. Baggins, who has travelled with us out of the west." "If you come in peace, lay down your arms," said the captain. "We have none," said Thorin, and it was true enough. Their knives had been taken from them by the wood elves, and the great sword Orcrist too. Bilbo had his short sword, hidden as usual, but he said nothing about that. "We have no need of weapons to return at last to our own as spoken of old, nor could we fight against so many. Take us to your master." "He is at the feast," said the captain. "Then all the more reason for taking us to him," burst in Fily, who was getting impatient at these solemnities. "We are worn and famished after our long road, and we have sick comrades. Now make haste and let us have no more words, or your master may have something to say to you." "Follow me, then," said the captain, and with 6 men about them he led them over the bridge, through the gates, and into the market-place of the town. This was a wide circle of quiet water, surrounded by the tall piles on which were built the greater houses, and by the long wooden quays with many steps and ladders going down to the surface of the lake. From one great hall shone many lights, and there came the sound of many voices. They passed its doors and stood blinking in the light, looking at long tables filled with folk. "I am Thorin, son of Thran, son of Thror, king under the mountain. I return!" cried Thorin in a loud voice from the door, before the captain could say anything. All leaped to their feet. The master of the town sprang from his great chair, but none rose in greater surprise than the raft men of the elves who were sitting in the lower end of the hall. Pressing forward before the master's table, they cried, "These are prisoners of our king that have escaped, wandering vagabond dwarves that could not give any good account of themselves, sneaking through the woods and molesting our people." "Is this true?" asked the master. As a matter of fact, he thought it far more likely than the return of the king under the mountain, if any such person had ever existed. "It is true that we were wrongfully waylaid by the elven king and imprisoned without cause as we journeyed back to our own land," answered Thorin. "But Loch Norparm may hinder the homecoming spoken of old. Nor is this town in the wood elves' realm. I speak to the master of the town and the men of the lake, not to the raftmen of the king. Then the master hesitated and looked from one to the other. The elven king was very powerful in those parts, and the master wished for no enmity with him, nor did he think much of old songs, giving his mind to trade in tolls, to cargoes and gold, to which habit he owed his position. Others were of different mind, however, and quickly the matter was settled without him. The news had spread from the doors of the hall like fire through all the town. People were shouting inside the hall and outside it. The quays were thronged with hurrying feet. Some began to sing snatches of old songs concerning the return of the king under the mountain, that it was Thor's grandson, not Thor himself, that had come back did not bother them at all. Others took up the song, and it rolled loud and high over the lake. Okay, I know how to do this one. The king beneath the mountains, the king of cavern stone, the lord of silver fountains, shall come into his own. His crown shall be upholden, his harp shall be restrung, his halls shall echo golden to songs of yore resung. The woods shall wave on mountains, and grass beneath the sun. His wealth shall flow in fountains, and the rivers golden run. The streams shall run in gladness, the lake shall shine and burn. All sorrow fail and sadness at the mountain king's return. So they sang, or very like that, only there was a great deal more of it, and there was much shouting as well as the music of harps and of fiddles mixed up with it. Indeed, such excitement has not been known in the town in the memory of the oldest grandfather. The wood elves themselves began to wonder greatly and even to be afraid. They did not know, of course, how Thorin had escaped, and they began to think their king might have made a serious mistake. As for the master, he saw there was nothing else for it but to obey the general clamor, for the moment at any rate, and to pretend to believe that Thorin was what he said. So he gave up to him his own great chair and sat highly and kindly beside him in places of honor. Even Bilbo was given a seat at the high table, and no explanation of where he came in. No songs had alluded to him, even in the obscurest way, was asked for in the general bustle. Soon afterwards, the other dwarfs were brought into the town amidst scenes of astonishing enthusiasm. They were all doctored and fed and housed and pampered in the most delightful and satisfactory fashion. A large house was given up to Thorin and his company. Boats and rowers were put at their service, and crowds sat outside and sang songs all day, or cheered if any dwarf showed so much as his nose. Some of the songs were old ones, but some of them were quite new and spoken confidently of the sudden death of the dragon and of cargoes of rich presents coming down the river to Lake Town. These were inspired largely by the master, and they did not particularly please the dwarves, but in the meantime they were well contented, and they quickly grew fat and strong again. Indeed, within a week they were quite recovered, fitted out in fine cloth of their proper colors, with beards combed and trimmed, and proud steps. Thorin looked and walked as if his kingdom was already reveined and Smaug chopped up into little pieces. Then, as he had said, the dwarf's good feeling towards the little hobbit grew stronger every day. There were no more groans or grumbles. They drank his health, and they patted him on the back, and they made a great fuss of him, which was just as well, for he was not feeling particularly cheerful. He had not forgotten the look of the mountain, nor the thought of the dragon, and he had besides a shocking cold. For 3 days he sneezed and coughed, and he could not go out, and even after that his speeches at banquets were limited to "Thank you very much." In the meanwhile, the wood elves had gone back up the forest river with their cargoes, and there was great excitement in the king's palace. I have never heard what happened to the chief of the guards and the butler. Nothing, of course, was ever said about keys or barrels while the dwarves stayed in Lake Town, and Bilbo was careful never to become invisible. Still, I dare say, more was guessed than was known, though doubtless Mr. Baggins remained a bit of a mystery. In any case, the king knew now the dwarf's errand, or thought he did, and he said to himself, "Very well, we'll see. No treasure will come back through Mirkwood without my having something to say in the matter. But I expect they will all come to a bad end, and serve them right." He at any rate did not believe in dwarves fighting and killing dragons like Smaug, and he strongly suspected attempted burglary or something like it, which shows he was a wise elf and wiser than the men of the town, though not quite right, as we shall see in the end. He sent out his spies about the shores of the lake, and as far northward towards the mountain as they would go, and waited. At the end of a fortnight, Thorin began to think of departure. While the enthusiasm still lasted in the town was the time to get up, was the time to get help. It would not do to let everything cool down with delay. So he spoke to the master and his counselors, and said that soon he and his company must go towards the mountain. Then, for the first time, the master was surprised and a little frightened, and he wondered if Thorin was after all really a descendant of the old kings. He had never thought that the dwarves would actually dare to approach Smaug, but believed they were frauds who would sooner or later be discovered and be turned out. He was wrong. Thorin, of course, was really the grandson of the king under the mountain, and there's no knowing what a dwarf will not dare and do for revenge or the recovery of his own. But the master was not sorry at all to let them go. They were expensive to keep, and their arrival had turned things into a long holiday in which business was at a standstill. Let them go and bother Smaug, and see how he welcomes them, he thought. Certainly, O Thrain's son, Thror's son, was what he said. You must claim your own. The hour is at hand, spoken of old. What help we can offer shall be yours, and we trust to your gratitude when your kingdom is regained. So one day, although autumn was now getting far on, and winds were cold, and leaves were falling fast, 3 large boats left Lake Town, laden with rowers, dwarfs, Mr. Baggins, and many provisions. Horses and ponies had been sent round by circuitous paths to meet them at their appointed landing place. The master and his counselors bade them farewell from the great steps of the town hall that went down to the lake. People sang on the quays and out of windows. The white oars dipped and splashed, and off they went north up the lake on the last stage of their long journey. The only person thoroughly unhappy was Bilbo. Chapter 11. On the Doorstep. In 2 days going they rode right up the long lake and passed out into the river running, and now they could all see the lonely mountain towering grim and tall before them. The stream was strong and their going slow. At the end of the 3rd day, some miles up the river, they drew into the left or western bank and disembarked. Here they were joined by the horses with other provisions and necessaries and the ponies for their own use that had been sent to meet them. They packed what they could on the ponies, and the rest was made into a store under a tent, but none of them men of the town would stay with them even for the night, so near the shadow of the mountain. "Not at any rate until the songs have come true," said they. It was easier to believe in the dragon and less easy to believe in Thorin in these wild parts. Indeed, their stores had no need of any guard, for all the land was desolate and empty. So their escort left them, making off swiftly down the river in the shoreward paths, although the night was already drawing on. They spent a cold and lonely night, and their spirits fell. The next day they set out again. Balin and Bilbo rode behind, excuse me, each leading another pony heavily laden beside him. The others were some way ahead, picking out a slow road, for there were no paths. They made north sorry. They made northwest, slanting away from the river running, and drawing ever nearer and nearer, to a great spur of the mountain that was flung out somewhere southwards towards them. It was a weary journey and a quiet and stealthy one. There was no laughter or song or sound of harps, and the pride and hopes which had stirred in their hearts at the singing of old songs by the lake died away to a plodding gloom. Yeah, yeah, a plodding gloom forest. Yeah, it's really plodding gloom. They knew that they were drawing near to the end of their journey, and that it might be a very horrible end. The land about them grew bleak and barren, through once, though once, as Thorin told them, it had been green and fair. There was little grass, and before long there was neither bush nor tree, and only broken and blackened stumps to speak of once long vanished. They were come to the desolation of the dragon, and they were come at the warning of the year, of the waning of the year. They reached the skirts of the mountain all the same without meeting any danger or any sign of the dragon, other than the wilderness he had made about his lair. The mountain lay dark and silent before them, and ever higher above them. They made their first camp on the western side of the great southern spur, which ended in a height called Raven Hill. On this there had been an old watch post, but they dared not climb it yet. It was too exposed. Before setting out to search the western spurs of the mountain for the hidden door, on which all their hopes rested, Thorin sent out a scouting expedition to spy out the land to the south, where the front gate stood. For this purpose he chose Balin and Kylie, and with them went Bilbo. They marched under the gray and silent cliffs to the feet of Ravenhill. There the river, after winding a wide loop over the valley of Dale, turned from the mountain on its road to the lake, flowing swiftly and noisily. Its bank was bare and rocky, tall and steep above the stream, and gazing out from it over the narrow water, foaming and splashing among many boulders, they could see in the wide valley shadowed by the mountain's arms the gray ruins of ancient houses, towers, and walls. There, li- there lies all that is left of Dale, said Balin. The mountain sides were green with woods, and all the sheltered valley rich and pleasant in the days when the bell rang in out of town. He looked both sad and grim as he said this. He had been one of Thorin's companions on the day the dragon came. Hello, Miller Bite. How you doing tonight? Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. They did not dare to follow the river much further towards the gate, but they went on beyond the end of the southern spur until lying hidden behind a rock they could look out and see the dark cavernous opening in the great cliff wall between the arms of the mountain. Out of its waters of the running river sprang, and out of it too there came a stream and a dark smoke. Nothing moved in the waste, save the vapor and the water, and every now and again a black and an ominous crow. The only sound was the sound of the stony water, and every now and again the harsh croak of a bird. Balin shuddered. "Let us return," he said. "We can do no good here, and I don't like these dark birds. They look like the spies of evil." The dragon is still alive, and in the holes under the mountain, then, or I imagine so from the smoke, said the hobbit. That does not prove it. That does not prove it, said Balin. Though I don't doubt you are right. But he might be gone away sometime, or he might be lying out on the mountainside keeping watch, and still I expect smokes and steams would come out of the gates. All the halls within must be filled with his foul reek. With such gloomy thoughts, followed ever by the croaking crows above them, they made their weary way back to the camp. Only in June they had been dressed in the fair house of Elrond, and though autumn was now crawling towards winter, that pleasant time now seemed years ago. They were alone in the perilous waste without hope of further help. They were at the end of their journey, but as far as ever, it seemed, from the end of their quest, none of them had much spirit left. I was going to show you this real quick before we turn the page. Another illustration, this one known as the front gate. There you go. Now, strange to say, Mr. Baggins had more than the others. He would often borrow Thorin's map and gaze at it, pondering over the runes and the messages of the moon letters Elrond had read. It was he that made the dwarves begin the dangerous search on the western slopes for the secret door. They moved their camp then to a long valley, narrower than the great dale in the south where the gates of the river stood, and walled with lower spurs of the mountain. Two of these here thrust forward west from the main mass in long steep-sided ridges that fell ever downwards towards the plain. On this western side, there were fewer signs of the dragon's marauding feet, and there was some grass for their ponies. From this western camp, shadowed all day by cliff and wall until the sun began to sink towards the forest. Day by day they toiled in parties, searching for paths up the mountainside. If the map was true, somewhere high above the cliff in the valley's head must stand in the secret door. Day by day they came back to their camp without success. Hello, half-warped tooth. I appreciate you showed the illustration. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I typically try to do. If I see pictures, I try to show the illustration. As long as I remember to do that, which to my knowledge I haven't yet failed to show the illustrations. And if I have, yeah, I can always show them later. But at last, unexpectedly, they found what they were seeking. Fily and Kylie and the Hobbit went back one day down the valley and scrambled among the tumbled rocks at its southern corner. About midday, creeping behind a great stone that stood alone like a pillar, Bilbo came on what looked like rough steps going upwards. Following these excitedly, he and the dwarves found traces of a narrow track, often lost, often rediscovered, that wandered on to the top of the southern ridge and brought them at last to a still narrower ledge, which turned north across the face of the mountain. Looking down, they saw that they were at the top of the cliff at the valley's head, and were gazing down onto their own camp below. Silently clinging to the rocky wall on their right, they went in single file along the ledge till the wall opened and they turned into a little stiff-walled bay, grassy floored, still and quiet. Its entrance, which they had found, could not have been seen from below because of the overhang of the cliff, nor from the further off because it was so small that it looked like a dark crack and no more. It was not a cave and was open to the sky above, but at its inner end a flat wall rose up that in the lower part, close to the ground, was as smooth and upright as a mason's work, but without a joint or crevice to be seen. No sign was there of post or lintel or threshold, nor any sign of bar or bolt or keyhole. Yet they did not doubt that they had found the door at last. They beat on it. They thrust and pushed at it. They implored it to move, They spoke fragments of broken spells of opening and nothing stirred. At last, tired out, they rested on the grass at its feet, and then at evening began their long climb down. Also, how are you doing tonight, Half Orc Truth? I'm forgot. Speaking of forgetting, I forgot to say that. Forgot to ask how you were doing today. Of course, nobody has to answer that question, but if you want to, that is up to you. In any way that you wish to answer it in the event you do so. Moving on. In the meanwhile, some of them explored the lights beyond the opening and found a path that led higher and higher onto the mountain, but they did not dare to venture very far that way, nor was there much use in it. Out up there, a silence reigned, broken by no bird or sound except that of the wind in the crannies of stone. They spoke low and never called or sang, for danger brooded in every rock. The others who were busy with the secret of the door had no more success. They were too eager to trouble about the runes or the moon letters, but tried without resisting to discover where exactly in the smooth face of the rock the door was hidden. They had brought picks and tools of many sorts from Lake Town, and at first they tried to use these. But when they struck the stone, the handles splintered and jarred their arms cruelly, and the steel heads broke or bent like lead. Mining work, they saw clearly, was no good against the magic that had shut this door, and they grew terrified, too, of the echoing noise. Bilbo found sitting on the doorstep lonesome and wearisome. There was not a doorstep, of course, really, but they used to call the little grassy space between the wall and the opening the doorstep in fun, remembering Bilbo's words long ago at the unexpected party in his hobbit hole, when he said they could sit on the doorstep till they thought of something. And sit and think they did, or wandered aimlessly about, and glummer they became. Their spirits had risen a little at the discovery of the path, but now they sank into their boots, and yet they would not give it up and go away. The hobbit was no longer. I'll read that here in a moment. The hobbit was no longer much brighter than the dwarves. He would do nothing but sit with his back to the rock face and stare away west through the opening, over the cliff, over the wide lands, to the black wall of Mirkwood, and to the distances beyond, in which he sometimes thought he could catch glimpses of the misty mountains small and far. If the dwarves asked him what he was doing, he answered, "You, you sitting on the doorstep and thinking it would be my job, not to mention getting inside. So I'm sitting and thinking." But I'm afraid he was not thinking much of the job, but of what lay beyond the blue distance, the quiet western land and the hill, and his hobbit hole under it. See, well, that's alright, no worries. My day has gotten better as it went on, and I've gotten to stop by to listen to your reading. Well, I appreciate you stopping by. Also, I do want to say, when it comes to reading, alongside doing these where I'm doing them in parts, I am also doing a audiobook thing where I do the whole book instead of just doing them in parts. I already finished Pen Pal, which is currently up behind that door up there, which is something I can't. Yeah, this door right here, that my finger is pointing at but not technically touching. The book is up there to signify that I have read it already. And after I'm done reading Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, I'll be reading a different book from the books that we got in this box over here of books that I have already read, with some exceptions because I do intend to read them. There is one book in there, but I'm probably going to use the newer version of the book, a newer copy of the book that I bought because this one was kind of damaged to where I really did not feel like real comfortable reading it off of that without it possibly being damaged as I was reading it. But that's going to be near the end of the month. And by near the end of the month, I mean July, at least one like on July 24th and probably get it done by July 31st. Primarily because that book is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And while I know that the author has recently said comments that a number of people don't like, I am not doing it because of her. I am doing it because I fucking love the Harry Potter series. As far as J.K. Rowling goes, I don't really give a shit about her, to be honest. Anyway, I mainly do it because I love the Harry Potter books. I grew up with Harry Potter. I watched the movies, and that's why I'm doing it. Because it's Harry Potter, not because of the person reading it. I will say that every time I read that book on the live streams. Every time. And if people get offended about that, cancel culture can try to cancel me, but I personally don't really care. I really don't give two shits about cancel culture to begin with. As far as I'm concerned, both sides of the coin of cancel culture are ding dongs. And I don't personally like them. Especially with you, bro, 100%. Yeah. I have gone on the record that I will read books, regardless of how I personally feel about the author. And if you've seen me read the U.S. history book that I got behind here, I will have no problem calling people out on their bullshit when it comes to what I'm reading in the book. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah, I know where I was at now. Alright. A large gray stone lay in the center of the grass, and he stared moodily at it or watched the great snails. They seemed to love the little shut-in bay with its walls of cool rock, and there were many of them, of huge size, crawling slowly and stickily along its sides. Tomorrow begins the last week of autumn, said Thorin one day. And winter comes after autumn, said Bifur. And next year after that, said Wallen. Now our beards will bow till they hang down the cliff to the valley before anything happens here. What is our burglar doing for us? Since he has got an invisible ring and ought to be a especially excellent performer now, I am beginning to think he might go through the front gate and spy things out a bit. Bilbo heard this. The dwarves were on the rocks just above the enclosure where he was sitting, and, good gracious, he thought, so that is what they are beginning to think, is it? It is always poor me that has to get them out of their difficulties, at least since the wizard left. Whatever am I going to do? I might have known that something dreadful would happen to me in the end. I don't think I could bear to see the unhappy valley of Dale again, and as for that steaming gate... That night he was very miserable and hardly slept. Next day the dwarves all went wandering off in various directions. Some were exercising the ponies down below, some were roving about the mountainside. All day Bilbo sat gloomily in the grassy bay gazing at the stone or out west through the narrow opening. He had a queer, aka weird, feeling that he was waiting for something. Perhaps the wizard will suddenly come back today, he thought. If he lifted his head, he could see a glimpse of the distant forest. As the sun turned west, there was a gleam of yellow upon its far roof, as if the light caught the last pale leaves. Soon he saw the orange ball of the sun sinking towards the level of his eyes. He went to the opening, and there, pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of earth. At that very moment he heard a sharp crack behind him. There on the gray stone in the grass was an enormous thrush, nearly coal black, its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. It had caught a snail and was knocking it on the stone. Suddenly Bilbo understood. Forgetting all danger, he stood on the ledge and hailed the dwarves, shouting and waving. Those that were nearest came tumbling over the rocks and as fast as they could along the ledge to him, wondering what on earth was the matter. The others shouted to be hauled up the ropes, except Bomber, of course, he was asleep. Quickly, Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbits standing by the grey stone, and the dwarves with wagging beards watching impatiently. The sun sank lower and lower, and their hopes fell. It sank into a belt of reddened cloud and disappeared. The dwarves groaned, but still Bilbo stood almost without moving. The little moon was dripping to the horizon. Evening was coming on. Then suddenly, when their hope was lower, a red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent in the clouds. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. The old thrush, who had been watching from the high perch with beady eyes and head cocked on one side, gave a sudden trill. There was a loud crack. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. A hole appeared suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. In case anybody was wondering before I continue about why I was doing when it was saying the word queer and I said aka weird, it's because that's what that word originally meant before it became what it's become now, widely known to be defined as. Back in the days of J.R.R. Tolkien, back in the days of this book coming out, the word was meant to be another word for weird. Now, some people could say, well, why didn't they say weird? Well, some people used weird, some others used queer. That's just how it was back then. Nowadays, we do use the word weird over queer, because, again, what the word means nowadays is very different compared to what it meant beforehand. So, whenever I use the word queer in this story, both before and after this chapter, just remember, it always was meant to be another word for weird. Nothing else. Just that. And if people don't understand that, or they just don't care and they want to try to say, oh, you said the word anyway. If you don't believe me, look it up. Look up on Google queer old definitions. Like old definitions, and it will say that. Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with the usage of that definition. Language evolves in amazing ways. Well, both amazing and not so amazing ways, depending on the word we're talking about here. And honestly, I prefer the old way of speaking. Personally, I don't care how a person speaks because, well, with obvious exceptions, of course, but like any kind of hate speech, I don't condone. Any kind of disrespect, I don't condone. Anything related to just being disrespectful to another human being, especially when it comes to something that they literally cannot control, I cannot, I have like a zero tolerance for that. I may give them a chance to apologize for what they, like, I'll probably time them out at first and then see if they'll apologize for their words. But if they don't, then I may have to consider banning them, especially if if they double down on what they were saying, because I have no room for hate in my community. Even if some of the things I have said or done on my channel may be perceived as hate speech and probably have pushed people away, like I said in my last community post, and I can see where they're coming from with that. At the same time, at the end of the day, I just don't condone hate. I may be respectful, and I may criticize people in a respectful way, but when it comes to legitimate hate, I cannot stand it. Okay. I believe... where was I at? What was the last sentence I said in the story? Because I was so busy talking, I kind of forgot where I was at. Normally I would use a bookmarker, but the thing is, my bookmark has this thing right here. Also, hello, Chucky. How you doing today? Yeah, my thing has this thing at the end, and it sometimes will block the words. And I know I could take that off if I really wanted to, but I'm not going to at the moment. Honestly, I already got that going with the Freddy bookmark. I already did that too, because I really hated it with when I was really annoyed by it before. Yeah. Um. Let me see here. I think either I was in the middle of the paragraph that starts with quickly Bilbo explained and ended with a hole appeared suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. Either that or I was in the middle of that paragraph and I just lost my place. Hmm. Also, it's getting a little hot in here. I'm actually gonna go ahead and get me something to drink real quick. Some tea, to be precise. For anybody gonna ask me, what am I gonna be getting to drink? I usually like to get tea. Tea. I think it's because of my British ancestry that I like to just drink tea. I don't know, but it is what it is. Be right back. Oh, that iced tea really does make that tea cold. That's a hell of a thing to say when you're coming back from getting some tea. But that tea was really ice cold. Dang, really. Let's see. That was awesome listening in on this. Hey, no problem. Have a good rest of your night, and I'll see you whenever the next time I see you, whenever that may be. Read stream or otherwise. I just decided, you know what, I'll just go ahead and reread that paragraph. Even if I already read it all the way, I'm still gonna do it. Because why not? Just to just do it again and know that I read it instead of acting like I did and move on and find out later. No, you didn't. The only problem with iced tea is if I don't drink it fast enough, that tea becomes water. Because of all that ice I got in there, it really sucks. When it's got water. More water than tea. Anyway, quickly Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbits standing by the grey stone, and the dwarves, with wagging beards, watching impatiently. The sun sank. Wait, actually, let's see. I think I did read this one, actually. I'm seeing it, it's like, I think I did read it all the way through. Hold on a second. I'm gonna do this, actually. Let me mute my mic real quick so I can check for myself. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, I just looked, and after taking some time to finally figure it out, I now know where I'm at. Hmm. Yep, I did finish that paragraph as a whole, so we are moving on. Quickly, trembling lest the chance should fade, the dwarves rushed to the rock and pushed, in vain. "The key! The key!" cried Bilbo. "Where's Thorin?" Thorin hurried up. "The key!" shouted Bilbo. "The key that went with the map! Try it now while there's still time!" Then Thorin stepped up and drew the key on its chain from round his neck. He put it to the hole. Excuse me if you heard that. It fitted and it turned. Snap! The gleam went out, the sun sank, the moon was gone, and evening sprang into the sky. Now they all pushed together, and slowly a part of the rock wall gave way. Long straight cracks appeared and widened. A door 5 feet high and 3 broad was outlined, and slowly without a sound swung inwards. It seemed as if darkness flowed out like a vapor from the hole in the mountainside, and deep darkness in which nothing could be seen lay before their eyes, a yawning mouth leading in and down. Hmm, so let's see. Hmm, let's see. We're at almost an hour and a half. I'm on chapter 12. I did say I was going to do chapter 12 by this point. I did say I was going to do chapter 12. Hmm. Here's where the fun begins. Because really, chapter 12 does have a good stopping, just like chapter 11, chapter 12 does have a good stopping point. Hmm. Hmm. Shit, I don't know what to do. Do I read this? Do I not? Hmm. Let's think. Hmm. Eh, we'll go ahead and read it. Chapter 12. Inside Information. For a long time the dwarves stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. "Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, and a hobbit full of courage and resource far exceeding his size, and if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance. Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. You are familiar with Thorin's style on important occasions, so I will not give you any more of it, though he went on a good deal longer than this. It certainly was an important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. By now he was quite familiar with Thorin, too, and he knew what he was driving at. If you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin, Thran's son Oakenshield, may your beard grow ever longer, he said crossly. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of two messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so that I am, I think, already owed some reward. But third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I've begun to trust my luck more than I used to in the old days. He meant last spring before he left his own house, but it seemed centuries ago. But anyway, I think I will go and have a peep at once and get it over. Now, who is coming with me? He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Filey and Kylie looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of offering, except old Balin, the lookout man, who was rather fond of the Hobbit. He said he would come inside at least, and perhaps a bit of the way too, ready to call for help if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this: they intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it if he would, but they would all have done their best to get him out of trouble, if he got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures, before they had any particular reasons for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company, if you don't expect too much. Hmm. The stars were coming out behind him in a pale sky barred with black when the hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier going than he expected. This was no goblin entrance, nor rough wood elves' cave. It was a passage made by dwarves, at the height of their wealth and skill, straight as a ruler, smooth floored and smooth sided, going with a gentle, never varying slope direct, to some distant end in the blackness below. After a while, Balin bade Bilbo "Good luck!" and stopped where he could still see the faint outline of the door, and by a trick of the echoes of the tunnel hear the rustle of the whispering voices of the others just outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than hobbits' care to make no sound, he crept noiselessly down, down, down into the darkness. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had run out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosened his dagger in its sheath, tightened his belt, and went on. Now you are in it for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went to put your foot right in it that night of the party, and now you have got to pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and am, said the least said the least tookish part of him. I have absolutely no use for dragon guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever. If only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel as my old front hall at home. He did not wake up, of course, but went still on and on, till all sign of the door behind had faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought it was beginning to feel warm. Is that a kind of glow I seem to see coming right ahead down there? He thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light steadily getting redder and redder. Also was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up and past him, and he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling like the noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with the rumble as of a gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. Excuse me. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone, before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short haul go on he did, and you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel, an opening of much the same size and shape as the door above. Through it peeps the hobbit's little head. Before him lies the great bottommost cellar or dragon hall of the ancient dwarfs right at the mountain's root. It is almost dark, so that its vastness can only be dimly guessed, but rising from the near side of the rocky floor, there is a great glow. The glow of smog. That's not the end of the chapter. We're about 10 pages in almost. That's one. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon, fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides stretching away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red stained in the ruby ruddy light. Smog lay with wings folded like an unmeasurable bat, turned partly on one side, so that the hobbit could see his underparts and his long pale belly crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest could dimly be seen, coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there in rows stood great jars and vessels filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the world was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tell and sing of dragon hordes before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment and with the heart desire of dwarves, and he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian, at the gold beyond price and count. He gazed for what seemed an age, before, drawn almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway, across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace even in his sleep. He grasped a great two-handled cup, as heavy as he could carry, and carry one fearful eye upwards. Smog stirred a wing, opened a claw, then rumbled of his snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, but the dragon did not wake, not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, lying there in his stolen hall while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating and a more fevered shaking was in his legs than when he was going down, but still he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, "I've done it. This will show them." More like a grocer than a burglar, indeed. Well, we'll hear no more of that. Nor did he. Balin was so overjoyed to see the Hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air. It was midnight and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarfs, or how they praised him and patted him on the back, and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarfs were still passing the cup from hand to hand, and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath it, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to, and blocked from closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes, from far down in the depths, of a bellowing and a trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Then the dwarfs forgot their job and their confident boasts of a moment before, and cowered down in fright. Smog was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce as a rule, especially after long possession, and Smog was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream, in which a warrior altogether insignificant in size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly, to a doze, and from a doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from that little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from afar above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. Then he missed the cup. Thieves! Fire! Murder! Such a thing had not happened since the first he came to the mountain. His rage passes description, the sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had but have never before used or wanted. His fire belched forth, the hall smoked, he shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at the little hole, and then coiling his length together, roaring like thunder underground, he sped from its deep lair, through its great door, out into the huge passages of the mountain palace, and up towards the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had torn and trampled him was his one thought. He issued he issued from the gate. The waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared, blazing into the air, and settled on the mountain top in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarves heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have all been killed, if it had not been for Bilbo once again. "Quick! Quick!" he gasped. "The door! The tunnel! It's no good here!" Roused by these words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. "My cousins! Bumber and Bofer! We have forgotten them. They are down in the valley." "They will be slain, and all our ponies too, and all our stores lost," moaned the others. "We can do nothing." "Nonsense," said Thorn, recovering his dignity. "We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin, And you too, Filey and Kylie. The dragon shan't have all of us. Now, you others, where are the ropes? Be quick! Sorry. Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. The horrible sounds of Smog's anger were echoing in the stony hollows far above. At any moment he might come blazing down, or fly whirling round and find them there, near the perilous cliff's edge, hauling madly on the ropes. Up came Beaufort, and still all was safe. Up came Bomber, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and then danger was upon them. A whirring noise was heard. A red light touched the points of standing rocks. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging in their bundles, when Smog came hurling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flame, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the brass before the door, and drove in through the crack they had left and scorched them as they lay hid. Flickering fires leaped up and black rose shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he passed again. The ponies screamed with terror, burst their ropes, and galloped wildly off. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them, and was gone. "That'll be the end of our poor beast," said Thorin. "Nothing can escape Smaug once he sees it. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay, unless one fancies tramping the long open miles back to the river with Smaug on the watch." It was not a pleasant thought. They crept further down the tunnel, and there they lay and shivered, though it was warm and stuffy, until dawn came pale through the crack of the door. Every now and again through the night they could hear the roar of the flying dragon grow and then pass and fade, as he hunted round and round the mountain sides. He guessed from the ponies and from the traces of the camps he had discovered, the men had come up from the river and the lake and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing. But the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high walled bay had kept out his fiercest flames. Long he had hunted in vain, till the dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to his golden couch to sleep, and to gather new strength. He would not forget or forgive the theft, not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent, he crept back to his lair, and half closed his eyes. When morning came, the terror of the dwarves grew less. They realized that dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, that it was no good giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away just now, as Thorin had pointed out. Their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smaug relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smaug, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as is the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the Hobbit, blaming him for what had at first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smaug's wrath so soon. "What else do you suppose a burglar to do?" asked Bilbo angrily. "I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is warrior's work. But to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of Thor on my back? If there is any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I am sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up. If I was 50 times as big and Smog was as tame as a rabbit. After that, of course, the dwarves begged his pardon. Pardon. What then do you propose we should do, Mr. Baggins? Asked Thorin politely. I have no idea at the moment. If you mean about removing the treasure, that obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck and the getting rid of Smog. Getting rid of the dragons is not at all in my line, but I would do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all, and I wish I was safe back at home. Never mind that for a moment. What are we to do now, today? Excuse me. Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but stay where we are. By day we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take the air. Perhaps before long one or two could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies. But in the meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I have got my ring and will creep down this very noon. Then if ever Smog ought to be napping, and see what he is up to. Perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has a sweet spot, as my father used to say, though I am sure it was not from personal experience. Naturally, the dwarves have accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become the real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now he knew, more or less, what was in front of him. Had he known more about dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door, almost closed, soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that smoke on a gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near the lower door. There was only the very faintest glow to be seen. Old Smog is weary in sleep, he thought. He can't see me, and he won't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo! He had forgotten or had never heard about the dragon's sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they can keep half an eye open, watching while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Smog certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance. He was just about to step out onto the floor when he caught a sudden thin and piercing ray of red from under the dripping lid of Smog's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of his ring. Then Smog spoke. Okay, I need to think of a good voice for Smog. He's a dragon. What do dragons typically have? For a voice, probably something like this. Well, thief, I smell you, and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come on, help yourself again. There is plenty, and to spare. But Bilbo was not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that, and if Smog hoped to get him to come nearer so easily, he was disappointed. No thank you, O Smog the Tremendous, he replied. I do not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as tales say. I did not believe them. Do you now? Said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality. O Smoke, the chiefest and greatest of calamities, replied Bilbo. You have you have nice manners for a thief and a liar, said the dragon. You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask? You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills and over the hills my paths led, and through the air I am he that walks unseen. So I can well believe, said Smog, but that is hardly your usual name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. Lovely titles, sneered the dragon, but lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive, and drowns them, and draws them alive again from the water. I came from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. These don't sound so creditable, scoffed Smog. I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ring winner and luck wearer. And I am barrel rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smog, but don't let your imagination run away with you. Personally, I like that voice for Smog. I think it works very well for him. This, of course, is the way to talk to dragons if you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also very wise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here which Smog did not understand at all, though I expect you do, since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring, but he thought he understood enough, and he chuckled in his wicked smile. Oh, excuse me. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself. Lakemen, some nasty skim of those miserable tub-trading lakemen, or I'm a lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age, and an age, but I will soon alter that. Very well, oh Barrel Rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your good. Don't have more to do with dwarves than you can help. Dwarves, said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Sorry. That voice is kind of hurting my throat now doing that, but it is what it is. Don't talk to me, said Smog. I know the smell and taste of dwarf no one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden body, and I know it. You'll come to a bad end if you go with such friends, the Barrel Rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But he did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make out at all. Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all. Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they're skulking outside. And your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking for them. And you will get a fair share. Don't you believe it? If you get off alive, you will be lucky. Bilbo is now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smaug's roving eyes, seeking for him in the shadows, flashed across him, he trembled, and an unaccountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself and tell all the truth to Smaug. In fact, he was in grievous danger of coming under the dragon's spell, but plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smaug the Mighty, said he. Not gold alone brought us hither. Ah! Ah! You admit the us, laughed Smaug. Why not say us 14 and be done with it, Mr. Lucky Number? I am pleased to hear that you enter the business in these parts, besides my gold. In that case you may, perhaps, not altogether waste your time. I don't know if it has occurred to you that even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you cannot get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me, had you never thought of the catch? 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. Those were the terms. Hey, but what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls? And Smaug laughed aloud. He had a wicked and a wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected that the lakemen were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgaroth. You will hardly believe it, but poor Bilbo is really very taken aback. So far all his thoughts and energies have been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered to wonder how the treasure was to be removed, certainly never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way to Bag End under Hill. Now and after suspicion began to grow in his mind. Had the dwarves forgotten this important point too, or were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect that dragon talk has on the inexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smaug had rather an overwhelming personality. I tell you, he said, in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and to keep his end up, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill, by wave and wind for revenge. Surely, O Smog the unaccessibly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smog really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor, while far up in the tunnel the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. Revenge! He snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Geroy, Gerion, Lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill when I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old, and strong, 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 thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death. I need a drink after that, because holy crap, that really hurt my throat a little bit. We are almost to the end of the chapter, too, as well. We are actually, like, technically 3 page flaps, but 2 if we're not including the page where the chapter ends. I have always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, that dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of the chests. But doubtless one so fortified has thought of that. The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Your information is antiquated, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me. I might have guessed it, said Bilbo. Truly there can nowhere be found the equal of Lord Smog the Impenetrable, where magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds. Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smog, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his peculiar undercovering on his previous visit, and was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said. What do you say to that? Dazzlingly marvelous, perfect, flawless, staggering, exclaimed Bilbo aloud, for what he thought inside was, Old fool! Why is there a large patch on the hollow of his left breast, as bare as a snail out of its shell? After he had seen that, Mr. Bagman's one idea was to get away. Well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer, he said, or keep you from much-needed rest. Ponies take some catching, I believe, after a long start, and so do burglars, he added as a parting shot, as he darted back and fled up the tunnel. It was an unfortunate remark, for the dragon spouted terrific flames after him, and fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of Smog was thrust against the opening behind. Luckily the whole head and jaws could not squeeze in, but the nostrils sent forth fire and vapor to pursue him, and he was nearly overcome, and stumbled blindly on in great pain and fear. He had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smog, but his mistake at the end shook him into better senses. Never laugh at life dragons, Bilbo, you fool, he said to himself, and it became a favorite saying of his later, and passed into a proverb. "You weren't nearly through this adventure yet," he added, and that was pretty true as well. Just wanted just wanted to see what time it was. The afternoon was turning into evening when he came out again and stumbled and fell in a faint on the doorstep. The dwarves revived him and doctored his scorches as well as they could, but it was a long time before the hair on the back of his head and his heels grew properly again. It had all been singed and frizzled right down to the skin. In the meanwhile, his friends did their best to cheer him up, and they were eager for his story, especially wanted to know why the dragon had made such an awful noise, and how Bilbo had escaped. But the hobbit was worried and uncomfortable, and they had difficulty in getting anything out of him. On thinking things over, he was now regretting some of the things he had said to the dragon, and was not eager to repeat them. The old thrush was sitting on a rock nearby with his head cocked on his one side, listening to all that was said. It shows what an ill temper Bilbo was in. He picked up a stone and threw it at the thrush, which merely floated aside and came back. "Drat the bird!" said Bilbo crossly. "I believe he is listening, and I don't like the look of him." "Leave him alone," said Thorin. "The thrushes are good and friendly. This is a very odd old bird indeed, and is maybe the last left of the ancient breed that used to live about here, tamed to the hands of my father and grandfather. They were a long-lived and magical race, and this might even be one of those that were alive then, a couple of hundreds of years or more ago. The men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding their language, and used them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere. Well, he'll have news to take to Lake Town, all right, if that is what he is after," said Bilbo. "Though I don't suppose there are any people left there that have trouble with thrush language." Hmm. "Why, what has happened?" cried the dwarfs. "Do go on with your tale." So Bilbo told them all he could remember, and he confessed that he had a nasty feeling that the dragon guessed too much from his riddles added to the camps and the ponies. "I'm sure he knows we came from Lake Town and had help from there, and I have a horrible feeling that his next move may be in that direction. I wish to goodness I had never said that about Barrel Rider. It would make even a blind rabbit in these parts think of the Lakemen. Well, well, it cannot be helped, and it is difficult not to slip and up into a dragon, or so I have heard," said Balin, anxious to comfort him. "I think you did very well, if you ask me. You found out one very useful thing at any rate, and got home alive, and that is more than most can say who have had words with the likes of Smaug. It may be a mercy and a blessing yet to know of the bare patch in the old worm's diamond waistcoat." That turned the conversation, and they all began discussing the dragon slaying, historical, dubious, and mythical, and the various sorts of stabs and jabs and undercuts, and the different arts, devices, and stratagems by which they had been accomplished. The general opinion was that capturing a dragon napping was not as easy as it sounded, and the attempt to stick one or prod one asleep was more likely to end in disaster than a bold frontal attack. All the while they talked, the thrush listened, till at last, when the stars began to peep forth, it silently spread its wings and flew away. And all the while they talked and the shadows lengthened. Bilbo became more and more unhappy, and his foreboding grew. At last he interrupted them. "I am sure we are very safe here," he said, "but I don't see the point of sitting here. The dragon has withered all the pleasant green, and anyway the night has come and it is cold. But I feel it is in my bones that this place will be attacked again. Smog knows now as I knows now how I came down in this hole, and you can trust him to guess where the other end of the tunnel is. You will break all this side of the mountain to bits, if necessary, to stop up our entrance, and if we are smashed with it, with the better he would like it. You are very gloomy, Mr. Baggins, said Thorin. Why has old Smog blocked the lower end, then, if he is so eager to keep us out? He has not, or we should have heard him. I don't know. I don't know. Because at first he wanted to try and lure me in again, I suppose, and now perhaps because he is waiting till after tonight's hunt, or because he does not want to damage his bedroom if he can help it. But I wish you would not argue. Smog will be coming out at any minute now, and our only hope is to get well in the tunnel and shut the door. He seemed so much in earnest that the dwarves at last did as he said, though they delayed shutting the door. It seemed a desperate plan, for no one knew whether and how they could get it open again from the inside, and the thought of being shut in a place from which the only way out led through the dragon's lair was not one they liked. Also everything seemed quite quiet, both outside and round the tunnel. So for a longish while they sat inside not far down from the half-open door and went on talking. The talk turned to the dragon's wicked words about the dwarves. Bilbo wished he had never heard them, or at least that he could feel quite certain that the dwarves now were absolutely honest when they declared that they had never thought at all about what would happen after the treasure had been won. We knew it would be a desperate venture, said Thorin, and we know that still. And I still think that when we have won it will be it will be time enough to think what to do about it. As for your share, Mr. Baggins, I assure you we are more than grateful, and you shall choose your own 14th as soon as we have anything to divide. I am sorry if you are worried about transport, and I admit the difficulties are great. The lads have not become less wild with the passing of time, rather the reverse, but we will do whatever we can for you, and take our share of the cost when the time comes. Believe me or not, as you like. How fitting that I finished that tea, because we're on the final 2 pages. Let's see if I can. I'm going to do a test. Let's do it. From that, the talk turned to the great hoard itself, into the things that Thorin and Balin remembered. They wondered if they were still lying there unharmed in the hall below. The spears that were made from the armies of the great king Thorfinn, long since dead. Each had a thrice-forged head, and their shafts were inlaid with cunning gold, but they were never delivered or paid for. Shields made for warriors long dead. The great golden cup of Thror, two-handed, hammered and carven with birds and flowers, whose eyes and petals were of jewels, coats of mail gilded and silvered and impenetrable. The necklace of Girion, lord of Dale, made of 500 emeralds, green as grass, which he gave for the arming of his eldest son, in a coat of dwarf-linked rings, the likes of which he had never been made before, for it was wrought of pure silver to the power and strength of triple steel. But fairest of all was the great white gem, which the dwarves had found beneath the roots of the mountain, the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone of Thrain. The Arkenstone, murmured Thorin in the dark, half dreaming with his chin upon his knees. It was like a globe with 1,000 facets. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon. But the enchanted desire of the hoard had fallen from Bilbo. All through their talk he was only half listening to them. He sat nearest to the door with one ear cocked for any beginnings of a sound without. His other was alert for echoes beyond the murmurs of the dwarves, for any whisper of a movement from far below. Darkness grew deeper, and he grew ever more uneasy. Shut the door, he begged them. I fear that dragon in my marrow. I like this silence far less than the uproar of last night. Shut the door before it's too late. Something in his voice gave the dwarves an uncomfortable feeling. Slowly Thorin shook off his dreams, and getting up he kicked away the stone that wedged the door. Then they thrust upon it, and it closed with a snap and a clang. No trace of a keyhole was there left on the inside. They were shut in the mountain, and not a moment too soon. They had hardly gone away any distance down the tunnel when a blow smote the side of the mountain like the crash of battering rams made the forest oaks and swung by giants. The rock boomed, the walls cracked, and stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had still been open, I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel, glad to be still alive, while behind them outside they heard the roar and rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and cliff with the lashings of his huge tail, till their little lofty camping ground, the scorched grass, the thrush's stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and it all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in silent stealth, quietly soared into the air, and then floated heavy and slow in the dark like a monstrous crow down the wind towards the west of the mountain, in the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and of spying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. This was the outburst of his wrath, when he could find nobody and see nothing. Sorry. Anyway, I'll read that line again just in case that thing messed up there. This was the outburst of his wrath when he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. After he had let off his rage in this way, he felt better, and he thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meanwhile, he had further vengeance to take. "Barrel Rider!" he snorted. "Your feet came from the water side, and up the water you came without a doubt. I don't know your smell, but you are not one of those men of the lake. You had their help. They shall see me, and remember who is the real king under the mountain." He rose in fire and went away, south towards the running river. And that is the end of this part of The Hobbit. We actually don't have very many chapters left to go, actually. Based on what I am let's see, we are on chapter 13 now. Let me see, what's our last chapter supposed to be? Chapter 19. So, I got 7 chapters left, including the one that I have to read. So, so depending on how short the next chapters are, I may do 3 or 4 chapters for the first part, and then read the final 3 after that. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, the book is almost at an end. We have literally not much left to go, which means after this, we have 4 books to choose from for deciding what will be the next book to replace it. I will do a bit of a, that's the one I'm looking for, I will do a bit of a preview for these 4 books, so that way you know what books are coming up. Once that poll is up, they are The Guest List by Lucy Foley, Star Trek Voyager, Book 15, Echoes, by these three authors. I'm not going to try to read their names at this moment. Sandcastles by Luann Rice. And also with other books that I have that I will probably do this with. 4 exciting mysteries. We have, and I can see it on the back here. No Time for Goodbye by Linwood Barkley. Daddy's Girl by Lisa Scottoline. Thunder Bay by William Kent Kruger. And I Heard That Song Before by Mary Higgins Clark. Now, I will be using this book as one in itself. Stop, hold on. Shut the door real quick. And don't say a word because I'm about to finish what I'm saying. Family member was about to come in here and thankfully he didn't speak. Younger family member, and I didn't want his voice to be heard for understandable reasons. Stop. Don't say anything. Actually, let me mute real quick. Sorry about that. That said young family member was coming back in and out of my room, so I had to talk to him, see what he was going to say. But anyway, like I was saying before he interrupted me on that, what I'm going to do is instead of trying to make it to where I'm going to read all 4 of these books back to back to back to back, what I'm going to do is I will be reading these books. So it'll be like where I'll say No Time for Goodbye, and then I will use for the option continue with um, Daddy's Girl by Lisa Scottoline, whatever. Yeah, so that's how that would work. So that is up, but like I said, that is up to the individual. I'm probably going to do a poll after we read the 3 or 4 chapters for The Hobbit on my next part, because that will most likely, at this point, it's most likely a guarantee at this point that we're going to finish The Hobbit before we finish the other 2 books. So that's what we're going to deal with. But anyway, but in any case, that is going to do it for me here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for watching.